Well, welcome. Today we have author Margaret Standafer with us. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. Now, you are going to be at the Detroit Lakes Library coming up here on May 16th. So I just thought it'd be awesome to have our viewers get to know you a little bit before the event. So now you live in Minnesota, correct?
I do.
Yes.
In the Twin Cities. Yep. Chanhassen.
And you set your book, your Misty Lake series books in Minnesota.
Yes. The first book that I wrote was titled Misty Lake and set in a town that I named Misty Lake, kind of obviously a fictitious town, but northern Minnesota was the inspiration for that. I have lived in Minnesota my whole life. And I don't think you grow up in Minnesota without being familiar with the lakes and the small towns that surround them and everything. And so, yes, Misty Lake was the town that I dreamt up in northern Minnesota, and it just kind of felt right. And then that one book turned into a series of 5 set in that town. So yes, it almost, somebody would to ask me, I'd be like, oh yeah, Misty Lake is, oh wait, no, it's not. It's only here. But sometimes you write so many books, it starts to seem like, well, that must be a real place. But anyway, yes, and the inspiration from a lot of the lake towns around Minnesota.
Sure. So there wasn't one specific town that you're like, ooh, I gonna, kind of mirror that.
Not really. Growing up, my parents bought a cabin when I was around 10, I guess. So then we were kind of stayed in one place for the summertime. But prior to that, and then when I was older and had friends, I spent time at a lot of different lakes and resorts, Brainerd area, or, up by Lake Winnie, or even as far as Leech Lake, and different places like that. And then the cabin that they bought was near Clear Lake, and very small town. And we spent a lot of time there. So I guess maybe if I picked little things from different places that I remember, but I wouldn't say it was modeled after one town in particular.
Sure. And so I've got ahead of myself. Could you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yes. So like I said, I was born in Minneapolis, grew up in the Twin Cities, and I live in Chanhassen now with my husband. I have 2 kids who are grown, but thankfully, is to make this mommy happy, they both live nearby. My son is in Chaska. My daughter is in Eden Prairie. So they are both just within a few miles. And my parents lived for a while up at that lake place that they had, but now, they're older and they live in Eden Prairie. I have a sister who's close. My brother's the only one who took off. He's in Michigan, but so I have a lot of family nearby, and Minnesota has always been my home.
Yes. And then we were just chatting briefly that you were a hockey mom.
I have 2 kids. The younger one is my son, and he played, he learned to skate as he learned to walk. My parents lived at the lake at the time, and we put skates on him, and he just took off. He played hockey from the time he was, before school and all through high school. And he also played baseball. My daughter was a competitive swimmer. Actually, she still does some of it. And so, yeah, you know what it's like. You're running here, running there. I did love hockey, though. I've always been a hockey fan. My brother played when we were growing up. And it's just, I knew a lot about that. I had to learn about all that. Obviously, I knew how to swim, but I didn't know anything about competitive swimming until my daughter started doing that. But hockey that's always been kind of a favorite of mine.
Sure. You'll fit right into Detroit Lakes.
Good.
Yeah. So, when did you figure out that you wanted to become an author?
I get asked that question all the time. And it's gotten to the point where I start to feel guilty answering it sometimes, because I've met so many people, and I know so many people who it's just always been their dream, and they've always loved to write, and they always have considered themselves writers. And people say, oh, I would love to write a book, or I've always wanted to write a book. I didn't. That was not my thing. In school, I was the one taking the math and science classes. Anything I could do to get out of anything creative, you would not catch me in an art class willingly. A music class, no way. Even, I could do English classes. I did fine, but the creative writing part of it, give me a research paper, give me something like that. That was the kind of writing I like to do. So being an author, writing a book was never on my radar. I worked at different jobs and, the business side of things. But it was funny. My husband, for years, every once in a while, he'd say to me, Margaret, you should write a book. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. You should write a book. You should write a book. And finally, well, maybe you should. Why are you telling me this? And it was the in one ear, out the other kind of thing. And then the day came when I didn't have any kids at home anymore. And all these sports and the things that were taking up all of my time and working and everything else, I had this time on my hands and I thought, okay, maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll try it. And honestly, I sat down probably just on the couch, put my laptop on my lap and I started writing and something just kind of clicked. And it was all of a sudden like, wow, I really like this. And I did, and I still do. And I've never looked back. So I have had to go back to my husband and say, you were right. Somehow you were right. This doesn't happen often, but yes, you were right. And no, so it was not a dream of mine. It was definitely something that came later in life. But I guess that just goes to show that, don't have to put your slot and stay there your whole life. There probably are other things that you can try. And I'm glad that I did, because now that I'm doing it, I do really, really like it.
Yeah. That's what I love to ask that question, because every author has a different answer, and I think it's great. Some people are like, oh yes, like you, when my kids are out, I wanted to take this up, or while they have kids, it's so true that you're not stuck and you can pursue this anytime.
Yeah, you can. And not even writing. Maybe you want to, play the guitar. Maybe you want to learn how to fly an airplane. I don't know. But, sometimes I think people tend to say, well, this is what I do. I'm an accountant and I can't, I can't do anything else. And maybe you're happy doing that and that's fine. But there maybe is something else out there and you just have to, a little leap of faith or something and give it a try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you tried.
So were like you hearing voices, like your character voices in your head, or did you just start kind of having stories come to mind? How did that start?
So I will say all the time when I wouldn't acknowledge the fact that maybe I should write a book, I always, and I thought it was normal, but I've talked to other people and they said, no, that's really not normal, Margaret. But I used to have these dreams where I would dream a movie from start to finish, complete with every little detail. I could hear the music in the background. I could everything, or it would be a book and maybe it was a children's book and I could see all of the illustrations and everything so clearly. And of course I'd wake up and, in a few minutes it would start to fade, but that happened so often. So yes, I guess maybe I did ignore all of these signs for so many years. And I also used to, your kids when they're young, read me a book, read me another book. And it's bedtime and they want one more. And finally I would I'm not reading another book. And then be, okay, fine. Once upon a time. And I would just make up a story off the top of my head like that. So maybe somewhere back there, this was always happening. And I just didn't, give it the space it deserved for a long time. But when it came to actually writing the first book, I don't know. I just had a kind of an idea and I sat down and just started to write to see where it would go. And that's still kind of the way I write. I don't do a lot of planning ahead of time. Things just kind of come to me. So
nice. Again, that's a gift.
Yeah.
How about the publishing process? What was that like?
So I did, when I wrote the first one, I didn't know really what I would do with it. As it got closer to completion and I thought, maybe it's not such a bad story. Maybe somebody else would like to read it. And I do have to say, while I was writing it, I didn't tell anybody. My husband eventually knew because he was, what are you doing with your computer all the time? But I didn't tell another soul. I didn't tell my kids. I didn't tell my parents, and nobody. And I think that might have actually helped me write that first book, because there was nobody ever asking me, how's it coming? What's it about? Because then I think I would have been, you know what, it's nothing. I'm not doing it because I don't want to answer all these questions before I have the answers myself. But so anyway, back to your original question about publishing. When I did decide, well, maybe I can do this, it was just a lot of research. I knew nothing about it. I did decide to just do it myself because what I read about traditional publishing just seemed a little overwhelming to me. The first of all, how difficult it is for your book to be accepted by a publisher, and then the fact that you're signing over control of it, which I'm a bit of a control freak. I don't know how that would have sat with me. And the time frame, they may take your book. It may not see the light of day for 2 or 3 years because it doesn't fit into their timetable with their release schedule and that kind of thing. And it just seemed like something that it wasn't for me. And there are so many tools out there now to do it yourself. So I'm kind of a researcher. That part of it is I like it. I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do things, and I made a ton of mistakes along the way, things that I would do differently now if I started over. But, there's a learning curve with anything, and it worked. And I just decided to do it myself, to give it a try. And, here I am. I think it's been 7 years or something. And 6, actually, I have 3 more written, so 9 books later, it's working. I could have done it differently, I'm sure, but for me, it worked out, just going the independent route and kind of learning as I go.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, that's why I tell my kids, we learn from our mistakes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked about 9 books, but you've got 6 that are out, correct?
I do. 6 are published. That first one that we talked about, the Misty Lake, was the title of the first one, and that turned into a 5-book series. The 6th one was a standalone novel. That one is titled I Know an Old Lady, and that is a different genre. It's it's a coming of age sort of novel. And then I have 3 that are written in the publishing phase right now. We're working on cover design and the final edits and that kind of thing. So those are coming out this year yet.
Super. Can you go into telling us kind of a little synopsis about the Misty Lake series?
Yeah. So I told you about my fictitious town in northern Minnesota. And it's a book about, well, the genre, I call it, it's clean romantic suspense. So there's romance a little bit. There's some suspense in there. There is no language or, scenes that you might not want your teenage daughter to read, that kind of thing. That's the route I went because I thought if I ever hand this over to my mother to read, I can't write, I don't know. That's me. I couldn't do it. So that's the genre. It's a 5-book series, and it is a story about 5 siblings, the McCabe family that lives in Misty Lake. So each book is kind of focuses on one of them, but at the heart of it, it's kind of about family too, because this is a tight-knit family. All 5 of them sort of, have their story, find their match, their person, their love, in different ways. The first one has a woman who comes to town and she's new to town, and she meets Jake. He's the McCabe in that story, different. So each one is different. The final one is just a little bit different because one of the siblings I had already married when the series started. So this one is a little bit something that happens in their marriage. And I kind of like the last one because it sort of ties it together. The family all kind of rallies together when something happens to that family. So it's sort of a good way to say goodbye, I guess, to that series.
And so then how do you come up with who the characters are going to be, their characteristics, their job, their looks? How do you do that?
As far as jobs, when I wrote the first one, my character in there, Sam, the woman who comes to town, she is a woodworker. And that's probably not a real common profession for a woman. But when I first started writing, and I wrote what was familiar, I guess, in the first couple of books. The setting, like I said, was familiar. I could draw on what I knew. My husband and my dad are both very accomplished woodworkers. So it just kind of, and he was the one who pushed me. And the first time I sat down to write, that's where he was. He has a workshop out in our, that he built on our property. And he was out there because that's where he spends all of his free time. So I thought, okay, well, that's what Sam is going to do. And then when I have questions, he can answer them, or my dad can answer them. So sometimes it's things I know. And, but sometimes it's things I think that I would like to know how to do. In the third book, we have a photographer, and I love to take pictures. I have no delusion that I'm any good at it, but I find it fascinating, and I really wish I was good at it. So that was an area of my research. I researched, different things about photographers. What kind of pictures do they take? What kind of, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's something that I'm interested in, because then I get to spend some time digging into research on those subjects. And, the characters sometimes, for me anyway, they kind of write themselves. It's like, well, this person would have to have this kind of a personality to fit into this story. And I don't know, they just, things kind of fall into place. Sometimes I do have to go back and think, no, that's not right, because this wouldn't work for this character. But for the most part, if I think this is what's going to happen in this story, then that would mean this person would have to have this kind of a personality, because this situation wouldn't happen if the person were different, so I don't know if that makes sense, but somehow in my, in my brain, it all kind of works out.
Sure. And do you, plot a lot? Do you have like Post-it notes everywhere, or poster boards of charts? Like how?
Yeah, I do know people who do that, and I'm envious of the people who can really outline a story. I know people who start with a general outline, then they go back and they add so much detail. By the time their outline is complete, their story is basically written. And I cannot outline to save my life. I mean, I have tried, and I just can't, because I feel like, and I don't know if it's because I feel like, well, then I can't veer from that outline. And that's just not how the process works for me. It's more, I sit down and I start writing, and then things happen. I mean, and it is not uncommon that I am writing and all of a sudden, whoa, I have a new character I never saw coming. And suddenly this person plays a pretty integral part in the story. But I didn't have the idea for that character when I sat down to write that morning. And had I been following an outline, I don't know that would have happened. So I use spiral notebooks. I take notes as I'm going, and I think, okay, this probably should happen at some point. Maybe this is going to be 3/4 of the way into the book, but this scene is going to happen. So I carry these notebooks with me, and that's, kind of an old school thing. I do have this fancy kind of author software program that makes it easy. It's perfect. It's ideal for note taking and for clipping things in. And I write in there, but I just can't get myself to take my notes in there. I need to have them on the table in front of me with a pen in my hand, and where I can just scribble. For some reason, I'm not good about typing it on the screen. So yes, Post-its and notebooks, and that's kind of how I work.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I've gotten better. I used to have to print everything. Like if I would get something online, I'd have to print it so I could read it on paper.
I know. And for me, there's something about, I guess that's how I learned in school too. I took a lot of notes, and studying for a test or anything, even if I would write it out, I would remember it better. So I think that still probably goes back to that. I need to just actually take a pen, and I need to write things down, because that's how I understand it better, and it sticks with me or something. But Yeah, I do too. I just need to write things down. I still have a calendar and, with a magnet on my refrigerator, even though, every device I own has a calendar function and I can put them in there. I can do that, but I still need to have it on my refrigerator where I can look at it. I don't know. That's just me. My kids think it's weird.
No, I love, I love talking to authors and about their process, because it does seem like everyone is different and there is not a formula that works for everybody. So it's great for people to hear that, I mean, their method is just fine.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to go about it. I fully agree with that. And from the people that I've gotten to know, a lot of times just gotten to know online, big, different writing communities and things like that. It's amazing the things that people do and the different ways they go about it. And I think if I had to do something that way, it would never work for me. But I'm sure they can say the same about me. I could never just sit down at the computer and start writing a story without having any idea what I'm writing. And that's just, everybody's different. Everybody's brain works a little differently.
That is for sure. Okay, so now your book, I Know an Old Lady. So that was an award winner, correct?
It was, yeah. It was won an award for the best indie published title in Minnesota last year. So that's partly sponsored by the Library Association. And that was really quite a thrill. It was the first time I'd entered something I wrote in a contest. And I know when I got the email saying I was a finalist, there was the happy dance, there were the tears. They were like, oh my gosh, really? And it was really exciting. And then to actually win was really quite a thrill. It still is.
Yes. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is that book about? Because I keep envisioning flies and sore throats and
I know, it's not funny. And that's how that one came to me. I mean, one day for some reason I get a song in my head or some kind of little commercial jingle or whatever it is. And for one day it was like, I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. And I'm like, And all of a sudden from there, I just got this idea. And what this story is about, it's about a teenage boy, a 16-year-old lives in Kansas, wheat farming area in Kansas in the early 1970s. And he lost his mother a few years back. He lives with his father who, things aren't good there. And he's getting into trouble. He gets in trouble one too many times. And a fire starts on the neighboring property. And the woman who everybody in town refers to as Old Lady Baxter, it was her property. And there are all kinds of rumors about this woman that she, was responsible for disappearance of some children in the 30s, 40s. And everybody thinks pretty bad things about her, and she's kind of a recluse. And anyway, since it's her property, his punishment winds up being he has to spend his summer working for her. So he's taking care of her lawn and her garden, and he has to paint her giant farmhouse and that kind of a thing. And of course, he's bitter, and of course, doesn't want anything to do with it. And she isn't very friendly at first, but it's about how their relationship evolves over the course of that summer. And what they both learn about each other, and what Billy, who's the character in the story, what he ultimately learns about her and about himself. So it is a coming of age story. It's, I don't know. I love it. I mean, I guess you could say that about all your books, but I don't know. For some reason, I just felt, how I would relate. I don't know. It's maybe odd that I would relate so much to the 16-year-old boy who I really have nothing in common with, but I don't know if I felt like, oh, maybe he could be my own boy or something, but I don't know. It's just, it's a story that, unlike the Misty Lake books, which maybe appeal more to women, and although I have had a number of men contact me and say they enjoyed them, maybe, sometimes because of the professions I think that I focus on in the books. But this one, I've had just as many men. I've had younger people, teens who like it. So it has maybe a little bit more of a wider appeal than the others. And I don't know. It's just, I like it. It's a good story, I think.
It sounds good. Yeah. How about the 3 that you have written but aren't out? How about, can you tell us a little bit about those?
So those are more back to that the genre of the Misty Lake books. They are, a little bit of romance. These are more kind of like women's lit. They deal more maybe with friendship than they do with romance. There is a little bit, a relationship for our main characters in there. It's about three women who all three find themselves in this small town in Wisconsin teaching middle school. And this is not the career path that any of them had envisioned or wanted or anything, but for different reasons, they all land there and they all sort of navigate that first year of teaching together, learn a lot from their students and learn a lot from the friendships that they build with each other, and becoming part of this little community there. And, like I say, then there's a little bit of romance in it too, but more it's about friendship and kind of, finding themselves and finding their place. The first one is titled Leaving Home, the second one Coming Home, and the third one Finding Home. So it's kind of like, not super original titles, I get that, but kind of like their journeys. The first one where she has left everything she knows. The second one actually came home to this town, but never intended on doing that. The third one never really had any place to call home. She lived her life all over the country growing up. And so for all of them, this kind of becomes their home.
And when are those coming out?
They are coming out later this year. I don't have the dates. I'm in the final stages of cover design and the stages of editing. With my Misty Lake books, there were quite a gap between them. So with these, I decided to have all three of them written and release them closer together because people can get a little antsy, a little, when am I going to get that next book? And I get that. If you're reading a series, you don't want to wait forever. So I decided to do that a little differently. They're all three written and they'll all be released, all three this year, probably within a couple of months of each other, just to keep it a little closer together. So people can, should they want to read the series and find they like the first one, don't have to wait so long for the second, the third.
And then where can people find your books?
My books are all available on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. Some of them are in the libraries. They can also, they're on, you can find them on Barnes & Noble, the paperback copies. And I do have a website, just margaretstandafer.com. There are links on there if people are interested to make it easier.
Perfect. And then back to you coming to the Detroit Lakes Library on May 16th.
Yeah.
What are you going to be talking about there?
Well, I'm guessing some of what we just talked about. I find that when I do talk to people, they're interested in the process. Why do you write? How did you come to do it? I get asked that question a lot, and that's good because people are curious. I'm talking a little bit, probably more about my book, I Know an Old Lady, because that was the reason for the invitation. That was a library-sponsored contest that I won. So a little bit more about that, and a little bit more about the writing process in general. I guess I'll see. I kind of have some things, but when I do talk to people, and not that I do it often, but when I do, I kind of like to see who's there and what are their interests. If I have a lot of people who are maybe considering or aspiring writers or have questions about the process, I'm more than happy to share whatever knowledge I have or my experience, so then I can cater the talk a little bit toward that. But those sorts of things. And then just my appreciation for the libraries in general, because honestly, libraries, ever since I've been a little girl, have just been a big part of my life. I've been such a reader, and so yeah, I will talk a little bit about that and how the very first time my parents let me leave the house on my bike alone was when they shooed me to the library because they got so tired of driving me there. And it wasn't really that close, but this, was the mid 70s and people let their kids get on their bike and drive however far. They're like, just go to the library. We don't want to go again. So yeah, that's kind of always been, it's always been a big part of my childhood, and still, taking my kids to the library and all that kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, I'm so thankful for you that you joined us today. And again, you can come and see Margaret at the Detroit Lakes Public Library on May 16th. So thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you very much for having me. This was truly a joy. I really appreciate it.